Hang on.
Yep, there it is.
Okay, we're on. Okay, Michael, I
Yep.
think we're on. We've had a bit of drama over the last day and a half. It's great to talk to you finally.
Yeah, excellent.
Right.
Great to see you, Steve. Great to see you, Evan. Good to talk to you again. What I'd like to suggest in this chat, we talk more about the ancient civilizations and the discoveries, and I certainly have a lot to share. There's never enough time, and I often don't have time to go up the mountain and share with people videos and that, so we can do it in this chat and cover some areas that we don't normally cover.
Brilliant. Sounds great to me. Like I said, when you finish with that, there's an echo there. Hopefully the echo will go. But yeah, that's great. I would like to do some skulls to complement that. Sounds brilliant. Let's start that. Let's talk about some of the old stuff.
Yeah, what I like to do is just throw into the pot the whole discovery of the fossils, the petrified fossilized body parts that I suddenly discovered, or I shouldn't say discovered. I suddenly realized that the stones, the weird shaped stones that ring like bells that I've been sharing for so many years now, for more than a decade, that these stones that have these weird acoustic properties and very strange shapes are not actually stones. And the reason why they are these weird, strange shapes is because they are fossilized, petrified body parts of all kinds of creatures. I'm talking about humanoids, reptilians, dinosaurs, and giants. And what I throw in here is we might even possibly have fossilized body parts of Anunnaki, because this is obviously very strong Anunnaki territory. There's Anunnaki fingerprints all over this place. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of these body parts are actually some Anunnaki body parts. And this is unquestionably, for me, one of the biggest discoveries in archaeology for the last 100 years. And the reason I say this is because the realization that these stones are not stones, that they're actually fossils of all these weird creatures, has changed the dynamics and the realization of what's going on here infinitely. First of all, it scrambles the timeline completely, and I'll explain why. It tells us that the history of this part of the world is really, really strange and highly disturbing, when you realize that many of these body parts, the legs, the ribs, the hearts, have been extracted out of these creatures and cut off and prepared for consumption. So when you realize this, it changes your perspective of what's been going on here for hundreds of thousands of years. And not only that, the mountains around me are covered in these fossilized body parts. It's not just isolated one or two items here. When I say the mountains are covered by these fossilized body parts, I'm not joking. And it happens to everybody that comes here. And we take them on a tour. I take them up the mountain, and I start pointing out these fossils everywhere. And literally, only then do people realize that I'm not saying this to sound impressive. It's literally covering the mountains. Everywhere you go here, you find these fossils. Some of them are so vast and so big, it's like the knuckles of a bone, and you can very clearly see where the leg that comes out of the bone head, where it comes out, where it's been chopped off and then turned to stone. The finishing, the surface and the patina of that rock is very different from where that bone was cut off, and you can see the fossilized, the petrified bone marrow and blood that was oozing out there. It's very, very different texture and very different color from the bone head itself. We find and these are large, like a Volkswagen Beetle size bone, right? So this tells us that these were giants, possibly very large animals or humans. And then throw into that the many channelings and shamanic journeys that we've had here that connect us to these giants that once walked this part of the world. And from 10 meters tall, or actually, let's say from about 3 meters tall to 10, 20 meters tall, to the 50-meter giants, to the 300-meter giants, and then obviously to the very large ones, the the mile-high giants that we read about in the book of Enoch. All of that stuff is here, scattered around the mountains, around Stone Circle Lodge and Museum, and the stone circles of South Africa. It's an unbelievable story.
Is it an accumulation or is it a mountainside? How is it like an accumulation of different bones that have all come together, or is it a storage site?
That's the thing. What's very obvious is that there was some sort of an event, like a flood. It seems to be a flood. I've sort of concluded that it's a flood, and a lot of mud and water came over the mountains, and all these body parts, whether they were already extracted or sometimes the creature itself was trapped in the mud, and then thousands of years. And obviously what you need then is, once the body parts of the creatures and plants also have fossils of plants. So it's not just animals. We have animal fossils and plant fossils in the rocks themselves. And what then happens is, once the mud traps these things, it stays there, obviously, and then immediately you start the leaching process of the minerals start to leach in and out of that body part or the plant, and the preservation happens, and then all you need is one key ingredient, and that's what I had to go and study and learn and realize how this happened, because they don't teach us in geology school. This is uncharted territory. This is a new discovery, completely new discovery in archaeology, in fossils, in paleontology, and in chemistry as well. Chemical engineering and metallurgy, because now we have these rocks that are very dense metamorphic rock that once was a body part of an animal. So
they were organic and they're now inorganic, which is really a contradiction of classification of different genre, isn't it? It's become one another. And does that explain why some of the rocks have that ringing sound that you've spoken about? Is that part of that sort of relationship?
Absolutely. And now we understand why they ring so well. Okay, let me first conclude. I'll come back to why they ring so well, but let me conclude. The missing ingredient that this body of mud has for all this stuff to turn to stone is electricity, and that comes in the form of lightning. And boy, do we have lightning here. There's just non-stop lightning every day, because we generally have storms and rain in summer. There's just lightning every day. It might not be where I am or where we are, but it's all around us. So virtually every day there's thunderstorms and lightning all around us. So, one lightning bolt discharge into the mud where all these body parts are held, that electric discharge creates the metamorphic process that turns that body part into stone, literally instantly. It's called instant fossilization or instant petrification. Now, this is not something new. This is something that's well defined, well studied. Many universities have got published papers and peer-reviewed papers on this, and so you can find this information everywhere. But they don't really have examples of this in nature the way that I've discovered it on such a large scale.
Well, I get that. This is scale found.
Yeah, and so the reason why these body parts ring like bells and have these very strong acoustic properties is because, to think about what it was a leg of an animal, and normally the stones that you've seen me ring, those are leg bones. That's actually like a femur or a ulna or some sort of a leg bone of some creature. It could be humanoid, it could be animal, and dozens of examples of those kind of bones and creatures. And so you have the bone surrounded by muscle, and the muscle is obviously meat with blood and blood in it. So when that muscle and the blood turns to stone, it's full of iron. So now you've got a combination of iron, silica.
Yeah.
And that's why they ring so well. It's the iron and the silica combination that gives it those very strong acoustic properties.
Jeez. Now we've got to go and look, because we've got about, how many singing rocks have we got? About 4?
4 or 5, yeah.
I'm going to have to go and look at them again. I'm going to have to look at them completely different, because it was interesting. The one thing I noticed about our silcons, they were never one type of rock, are they? Whatever it is. They vary so much. Now, the singing ones, the ones with that high pitched, I'm just going through my head now. Why couldn't that happen?
The obvious giveaway signs that you're dealing with a fossil and not just a rock or a piece of a bedrock is, again, familiarize yourself with the environment. Look at the bedrock. Look at the bedrock that comes out of the ground where you stand. And then look at how some of that bedrock has broken off and is scattered along the surface and lies on top of the ground in places. And then in between there, you've got different kinds of rocks that have nothing to do with the bedrock. And those are very obviously and very quickly recognizable.
Yeah.
And those are often the rounded, the more organic flowing shapes of rock that you can clearly see that not jagged, they've got sharp edges, and they don't have that kind of form. And those would be the smoking gun to point you in the direction of petrified, fossilized body parts.
Well, that's something different. I learned something today I didn't know before. I'm out to the rocks tomorrow, into the rainforest. We'll go and have a look and we'll check them out, because it makes sense to me, because I know the ones you're talking about, because we've got a couple of them too. And they ring. I mean, something's been done to them. And the idea of iron being inside them makes so much sense to me, because why is it resonates like that? And those rocks are 2 octaves above everything else, and you can't. Gee.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's the iron in the blood. When the blood in the meat, in the muscle, then turns to stone with the bone at the center of it, you've got a perfect combination of iron and quartz that just rings so beautifully. And it's the elongated ones, the leg bones, that ring so nicely. The big ones also ring. Often they ring if they're positioned properly, if they're not connected to too many other stones. You've seen these big, rounded, organic-shaped rocks, and when you bang them with a small stone, they ring beautifully. Dong. They have beautiful ringtones, so you see that as well. The really important thing about this petrification process is that it is an extreme transformation process. It's not just a bone that turns to stone and you can see that it's a bone. It's often the case. Many of the stones that I have that are bones, that where the meat has been stripped, you can see it's a bone. I've got many on display in my museum. I have hundreds of these in my museum, maybe thousands now. So I've stopped collecting them unless it's a very beautiful specimen that I want to add to the collection. I just leave it where it is because it's just too much. Literally. I still have boxes filled with these fossils that I haven't even unloaded until I finished the new museum and I got more space. So what happens is that sometimes you can very obviously see, oh, this is a bone or this is a rib, and the ribs are really interesting. One of the greatest examples of conscious desecration of creatures or cutting up of creatures are on display. You can clearly see cut marks and knife marks where the legs have been severed and cut off the body. Like we cut chickens and legs of lamb and cattle and whatever. The way you see them hanging in the butcher shop, that's what they look like. And you can see also the different types of exterior skin, the finish on many of these. They vary dramatically. Like sheepskin is very different from cow skin or pig skin. So when you had animals with those kinds of different skins, and that skin then turns to stone, it takes on a different color, a different texture, and different finish. And for many years, I was talking about the external part of these fossils, of these stones, as the patina that grows on the stones. Now, that is true. That actually happens. The patina does grow on these stones. But often what I previously thought was patina is actually the external layer, the epidermal layer of that creature. So things keep shifting, and you can see the different color, the different texture. Some of them of dinosaur texture. You can see the rough dinosaur reptilian skin. I've got lots of photographs on my website of the beautiful reptile scales. Oh my God. One of the scales is literally, I mean, that's the scale is the size. The scales are like that size, you know, large scales next to each other with gaps in between that have turned to stone. So imagine the size of that creature. And we have claw marks. That's like from small teeth and claw marks that was, you know, left in what was a piece of steak or a piece of meat at the time. And then it turned to stones. And I got a stone with a reptilian skin on the outside with these claw marks going into the piece of meat. And now it's a piece of stone. It's just spectacular. And we have small versions of that. And we have huge versions of that. Like I said, imagine a Volkswagen Beetle with 2 claw marks going into it. And you can clearly see, you know, these claw marks or teeth marks going into it. So how big was the creature that was eating this other creature? It just changes the playing field completely.
Well, I'm thinking straight away when you mention that.
Yep.
We've got what's called a fossilized piece of wood. You know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah, no, it's in my head too.
A fang. It's a perfect fang mark that runs all the way through there, and they've called it fossilized wood. It is so smooth around the edge of it, you'd wonder how anyone managed to make it so smooth. And when you're telling me this, all I'm thinking of is when you said this, I'm just thinking straight at, and it's cut sheer across the top, right? Is that wood or is it a tooth?
Yeah, I know.
I am going to have to have a look.
I was picturing that as soon as you described it.
Yes, so was I. When you were doing this, Michael, I'm going through thinking we've got this thing. The university, it was taken from university and sold on the open market. They call it petrified wood, but you've never seen the wood. And next time we're doing it, I'll bring it and show it to you. Okay, when we do our next presentation, I'll go and get it. That's got to be a tooth. It has to be a tooth.
I have a whole table of teeth and claws, and the teeth are quite obvious. And they've various sizes from little teeth of, you know, like a saber tooth kind of tiger-sized teeth to very large teeth. But the one that really shook us up is a tooth that's clearly a humanoid tooth. One of these incisors, or one of these incisors. And it's like it's about more than a foot. Where you can clearly see the root. You know, the root of the tooth. It goes into this point. And then it's got this area where the gums would go around it, and the flattened area that goes down, which is that part of your teeth sticking out. But it's huge. That tooth belongs to somebody that was 100 meters tall. And together with that, with that tooth, I have what is a fingertip. This first part of the finger, that first part of the finger there, where you can clearly see.
Finger. Where
you can clearly see where the nail was at the top. For some reason the nail is not there, and that is a bit interesting. That's interesting. But you can see the veins and the arteries under the nail, and then at the bottom you've got where the blood, when you cut off or sever a finger, the tip of a finger, I call it the tip of a finger, it's actually not, I'll explain to you in a second. And when you sever that part of the body, the blood drains to the bottom and collects at the bottom. Before it then congeals and then.
Wow, Michael, this is what I went to get.
Yeah, I saw that. I could see and hear you guys, but for some reason you lost me. Yeah. So if you could just hold that up next to your head so I can see it. Just don't hold it too close to the camera because it gets blurry. Take it back a little bit. Yeah. All right. Can you hold it sort of like this sideways so I can see the bottom?
On the bottom?
Yeah. Just I can see the bottom part. Yeah, that does look like it's being cut there. That's very obviously being cut there. So now the question is this the tip of a much longer tooth? Or was it a piece of wood that at one stage was sharpened to be a long stick with a sharpened tip? My first reaction was, it looks like a tooth because it looks identical to a lot of my teeth that I have discovered here. But my teeth have a very different finish. It doesn't have those lines and striations in it, which which does suggest that it was probably something different, not a tooth, because a tooth wouldn't have those kind of striations like a piece of wood. Yeah. And so that could have been the tip of a wooden spear that was then cut off, and then turned to stone, and that's why it looks like this.
Yeah, the only thing is that if it was a tip, I've got the top of that is so fine, it's not going to pierce. That's the drawback with this. I mean, I'm not sure what it is. Yeah. And also, if you're going to hold it, which you do, your thumb goes across this piece here and it rests in there, because that's how silcons work, and they sit in the back of your palm. I think it's been cut in to be shaped to be a silcon as opposed to a weapon as such, because all of our silcons have the same issue. If you look at the back of my palm, they always sit in there, thumb on top. So I know. I looked on the back. I knew there was striations on the back, and that is an issue. Yeah. But I don't think it's a spear as such. I'm not sure. Whereas the other ones, I've got other ones where there's no striation. I'm thinking of the I've got one that's like a fingerprint, like that finger there, an index finger, and that one actually works for me. But I think you're right. The striation on the back is interesting, but again, you've got that line that's been cut all the way around it, and it joins back as one continuous line. Well, that's not striation. That's been done deliberately, and they've cut around with one main point. So I don't know what it is, but I'm going to be looking at all our silcons to work out what we've got. It could be anything. So
yeah, that's a beauty. But my suggestion is, now that your brain has been reprogrammed, and that's really what it is. Once I was blind, now I can see. Now when I go out in the mountain, literally, it's wherever I go. It doesn't matter where you are. And these fossils are not just in the area that I'm in. They right across Southern Africa. We go into Zimbabwe, into Botswana. We go 1,000 miles from here, and we find fossils everywhere. Yeah. Once you know what you're looking for, they are everywhere. So it just opened your mind to the vastness of what happened here, and then the destruction through this flood that happened, because all of these fossils are very clearly what are defined as mud fossils. They're not fossils from lying, on the surface on the desert sand or whatever, and then turn to stone. I mean, that process itself is still completely inexplicable. Geology and chemical engineers and metallurgists and whoever studies those processes have no idea why that happens. So that's clear indication that metamorphosis is quite possible. Something was organic, it was carbon-based, and now suddenly it's inorganic or it's silicon-based. Yeah. So metamorphosis happens around us all the time in the form of petrification and fossilization. So if it can happen naturally, it can happen or over a period of time. And I'll tell you what got me, what first drew my attention is when I went to Wits University and I spoke to Professor, whatever his name was, I forget now, the guy head of paleontology there, who gave me an audience and showed me that giant petrified bone that came from Namibia. And I was fortunate to have seen that bone and actually shot that little video with him. That's on my YouTube channel. And he's supposed to be an expert in this. That bone has since been repatriated to Namibia, so it's now not here. He made the point that that bone is full of crystal. It's crystallizing. It's turning to stone. It's actually stone already. It's a crystalline structure. Right. It's no longer a bone. So based on the fact that it's now turned to crystal, they estimate it's at least 40,000 years old. Okay, so the mainstream paleontologists and those kind of people have some sort of a timeline, which I don't necessarily agree with, but they have their own timeline that shows you how something goes from being organic to suddenly being inorganic. Why that happens remains a mystery, and that has not been explained by any body of science available today. Isn't that interesting?
And what that means too, Michael, is because as you said, if electronic strikes create that fossilization, the dates that we give because something's in a geological area, it means nothing. It means nothing whatsoever, because once it's been hit by lightning, the fossil, the strata is going to stay the same, but the thing inside's changed completely. It's got nothing to do with it.
It has.
So that means all the dates it got are now under question. If fossilization can happen basically on a massive strike like that, it's from that moment the date is valid. But it's not. We don't know where it goes backwards from there, do we? We don't know anymore.
Yeah. It changes everything. Once you realize you can have instant petrification and fossilization, changes everything. So some of the things that we think might be millions of years old could just be a few hundred years old or a few thousand years old. That's it.
That's it.
And I have some great examples of that. So, for example, in these mountains that I go right around me, there are mud deposits, and so I've done several documentaries on that already. You can see the walls of mud that you can see as evidence of churning and moving mud, because where the forestry guys have cut a road through it, they've actually created an archaeological dig. So they expose this long wall of strata that you can look at and study. So I don't have to do digs. I just have to drive along country roads and forestry roads and explore all the digs that they've created for us. So you've got a lifetime of discovery here without ever having to dig.
Just follow the loggers wherever they're gone. They ripped the whole place.
Yeah. So, but now we realize that there was definitely a huge mud flood and deposit of mud right over the mountains. And remember, we're 2,000 meters above sea level here, where I am. When we go up these mountains, we're 2,000 meters above sea level. Most of South Africa has got very high elevation. Johannesburg is 1,600 meters above sea level. So, and where we are, we're slightly lower at about 1,450. My town, but when you go up the mountains, you go back up to 2,000 meters above sea level. So whatever flood this was, it was extreme. It covered these mountains and deposited this flood. So that tells me that it may have done so all over the world and not just here, if it was that big. Because we're far away from the coast. We're miles away from the coast. We see the same mud deposits and fossilized mud fossils across all of Southern Africa. So that tells me if this mud flood happened here, covering the whole southern part of Southern Africa, it must have covered other parts of the world, especially Australia, which has got a lot lower elevation as well.
Oh, look, we've got dreaming stories there about, I still remember one in particular, where it basically is about this black fella. It's just written like that goes in a boat that picks up the survivors from island to island to island. It's the same all over the world. Everyone has these stories because it happened. Yeah. You're right. And I think it was quite recent too, Michael. I mean, if you look at our records, you'll find an archaeologist will tell you that around about 12,000 years ago, world population dropped by 95%, and that's the end of their sentence. They won't take it further by saying, let's think about this. No. They'll just make the statement, it happened. But they don't tell us why. It had to be something of the order of what you're talking about and what the original people are talking about, where you're going around to pick up the survivors. It's not as if they're all in a big mass. You've got to go and find them, man, because most people got done in. And it's in the records, 5%, something happened. And, I mean, you've got stories about Atlantis and Lemuria all being submerged. It's in every myth. It's in every legend that's been carried back from the past without exception. But for some strange reason, Michael, I don't fully get why, we've decided we weren't there, but we know it didn't happen. It's sort of a strange setup.
Yeah. Well, we know why it is. The global elite are trying to create a species with amnesia, lobotomized sheeple that just follow and believe everything they're told. So we know we know the agenda, we know the game, we know what's happening in the world right now with this whole COVID thing. So as long as we realize that we're learning more and more from the history, the true history, the origins of humankind, the ancient civilizations from these kind of discoveries, and realizing that there was a whole different world going on here that we have got no idea about. Not only these fossils that I'm referring to now, that may be Anunnaki fossils and body parts as well, scattered among them, because the Anunnaki died as well. The Anunnaki they may have been immortal in terms of age-wise, but they died through accident, and some of them, if they died on their own, they wouldn't have someone to revive them and bring them back to life. So they would perish and disappear and be covered by mud. So some of them would have been Anunnaki fossils as well if they didn't get help. So this is a fascinating time, but here's the kicker. Okay, this is the one that really scrambles the timeline. At this stage, while I'm sitting here talking to you,
yeah,
all the stone circles. Listen to this, how this changes everything. Now, we know there are millions of stone circles. My estimation is about 10 million of these stone circle structures across South Africa, Zimbabwe, and parts of Botswana and Mozambique. But mostly South Africa and Zimbabwe, they go up in this wide 500-kilometer strip right through Southern Africa, South Africa, right across Zimbabwe north, and crossing over into what's today Botswana and Mozambique. And then it goes further north through Zimbabwe into Zambia, across the Zambezi River, and right past the Victoria waterfalls there, which are spectacular, by the way. If anybody hasn't been to Victoria waterfalls, oh my God, they are absolutely, just like, I thought they just literally, when you see the Victoria waterfalls, oh, the smoke that thunders, yeah. And so you've got this vast belt of these ancient ruins that go up all the way north, and I wouldn't be surprised if they carry on north all the way to Egypt. I would not be surprised.
I would not be surprised at all, Michael, if it does. In fact, I'd be surprised if it didn't. Seriously,
because Adam's calendar. Keep in mind that Adam's calendar, Great Zimbabwe, and the Great Pyramid of Giza are all lined up on the same longitudinal line. So that is not by accident. So that tells me that historically they were all connected, and whatever civilization, which I believe were the Anunnaki, had something to do with the construction, had a reason for putting them on that longitudinal line all along the Nile River, the Nilotic meridian. So, but here's the kicker. All of the stone circles that I have explored that are open and are accessible, some of them are very far from the roads. It's a long walk to get to them. I mean, they're everywhere. They're all connected to each other. There are thousands of them that you literally walk across thousands of them in one day. All of them, every single one of them that I have explored, the stones in the walls of those stone circles are made up of fossilized body parts.
Oh, that changes things.
Okay.
Right.
Not only does it change things, it scrambles the timeline completely. Because now, what happened here? This is just unbelievable. It just.
Michael, how long have you found this out? Is this something that just come up recently? Have you just got to this stage now? Because before you were calling them rocks, and that was cool. When did you find this? When did this come to you?
This came to me in January 2018. What was on the very first Stone Circle research expedition that I held, and there were 12 of us that spent a whole month, literally going up the mountain every day and just exploring, just looking around to see what we find. And at that time, basically on the first day that we went out, that I'd picked up this long stone. We walked up we have these fire breaks. I'm sure you have them in Australia as well. They burn these fire breaks in the mountains and forest areas, so they prevent fires from spreading. So those fire breaks are always great because there you can see the channels and the stone walls that are there. And the stone circles are in the bush and covered by trees and bush. I know that in Australia you call it the bush as well. People outside of our countries don't know what bush is. Basically the outdoors where you got trees and high tall grass growing, and you can't see the walls of the stone circles at all. They're covered, and then the fire breaks clear up, and so you can see the walls and the channels and so forth. So you can walk up the fire breaks and go from, cross the walls and so forth. And so we were walking up one of these fire breaks, and there were these beautiful examples of these walls everywhere. And I, once again, picked up this long, thin stone. And I have many of these already in the museum. So it was not something new. It was just another one of those. So I picked it up, and my mind was still thinking rock, stone. And I said to myself, why are these stones these weird shapes? Stones don't make these shapes, right? And I put it on one of the walls, and we went further up, and 20 minutes later or so, we were coming down. And I said to myself, I put the stone there, and I said, by the time I come down here, I will know what the stone is.
Precious.
I very clearly remember telling myself that. I wanted to figure out the mystery why these stones are these weird shapes. So I put that stone there, and I manifested my own future. It was literally like an instant manifestation. Because like half an hour later, we were coming down, and I saw that stone, that long stone lying on the stone wall from about 10 meters away. And I went, oh my God, that's not a stone. That is a rib. It is a rib of nature. Yeah. And then I got closer, I picked it up, and I could clearly see where it was attached to the rib cage. It's got this much thicker portion. You can still see the fatty, sinewy stuff that obviously is attached where you rib. Like when you go and get ribs at the rib shack or wherever you have in Aussie. Right? It looks just like that. And then right next to it was another rib, and that was the smoking gun that just gave it away. Right next to it was another rib, a slightly different shape from different part of the body, higher up.
Higher up. I gotcha. Yeah. There was a gradation.
So it bends differently. It's got a different tip, and that rib still had the meat attached to it, but the meat was cut. Like clearly, somebody was cutting the meat like they were eating it. Yeah. The way that, and that just gave it away. That somebody was cutting up animals and creatures and eating them and preparing them for consumption. And that's when we started to pick up the big shoulder blades that look like, and legs of lamb and legs of whatever. We call them legs of creatures, from small to large, and everything suddenly changed.
It does, so now, because, when you think of it, it's such a logical thing too, Michael, because what we're saying is, yes, a piece of wood, which is organic, can be turned into a fossil. Okay, so why can't anything else that's organic be turned into a fossil? There's no reason why that shouldn't be the case, but no one thought it through.
I went, and obviously once I discovered this, I then went on this 6-month education process where I looked up all the articles I could find on petrification, transformation, transmutation, metamorphosis, fossilization. What is the process? What is the chemical process and the organic process that happens in that transmutation process? So believe me, I went into this and I studied it greatly. To my horror, I discovered that while they present a lot of information and interesting information, where I believe they actually get some of the science wrong, but they do present the argument very succinctly and without argument that instant petrification and instant fossilization is a common thing. It happens all the time.
That's the thing they agree on.
Yeah, there's actually an Australian guy. Oh my God, what I keep referring to him in my lectures. Peter Mungo, Peter something Mungo.
That brings a bell.
My goodness. Let me actually look him up. Peter, because he is Peter Mungo Jupp. Yeah, Peter Mungo Jupp. He's a very well-known Australian lecturer and a researcher scientist. He's got great amount of information about instant petrification. So I looked at a lot of his lectures, and you don't need to look much further than that, because he brings out, he's done his homework, and he shows you the examples of how in the modern world, how we have wonderful examples of instant petrification and fossilization. One of the best examples was somewhere in Alberta, Canada. They were chopping down trees to put some high voltage wires up. And so they chopped down some of these trees to make space for it. And while they were putting the wires up, one of the wires fell and touched one of the tree stumps. And they came back the next day, and that tree stump had turned to stone, solid rock, from being a tree stump one day to being solid rock the next day.
So that's no different than a lightning bolt doing exactly the same thing as that. So if it's happened there, it can happen everywhere.
Exactly. Now, before I lost you earlier, I have some great examples of this petrification, of turning the mud to stone. I tell you, not only do we have individual organs and body parts that were already cut up and prepared for consumption before they were trapped in the mud. So that's why they are separate from the body. Otherwise, why would they be separate from the body? And obviously, some of the great examples are the hearts. So they were also taking the hearts out of these creatures. That's the strangest thing. Why would they be taking the hearts out? Were they eating and consuming hearts? Or did they not want to eat the creatures with the hearts? Was that a bad thing? Who knows? These are all very interesting spiritual, philosophical questions.
It could be, yeah. It could be about the spirit of the animal. Yeah, they could be using ceremony.
Yeah. So we have, as we go up the mountain, we have these layers of mud, and the mudstone, and different stages of turning to stone. Sometimes it's just pure mud, then a little further that mud suddenly becomes mudstone, and then a little further it's even more dense mudstone. So you can see how that mud is going through various stages of petrification itself.
Yeah.
And it happens to it as it goes through those stages. And then there are places where you can see there was a lightning strike. So everything within a certain radius around that lightning strike has turned to Hornfels rock. Hornfels rock is that ringing stone that rings like a bell. And Hornfels rock is well recognized in geology as a metamorphic rock. So they got that right. We know that Hornfels is a metamorphic rock. It means it was something else and then became something else. It went through a metamorphic process. So they spot on with that. But the Hornfels
process was above, not below.
Yes. Bang. Yeah. So the lightning strikes, and now you can see the layers of mud have suddenly turned to this Hornfels rock, that dark blue, black, dense quartzitic rock that rings so beautifully. It's really dense. And then suddenly it becomes mud around it again. So I've got those kind of examples as well to show that lightning strikes turn mud into Hornfels rock. It's just a beautiful example. So I'm sitting here with all this incredible archaeological and geological stuff right around us. It's like a giant adventure, non-stop adventure.
Problem is, mate, that what you've got with that is you're rewriting the whole of their story, and they don't really like rewrites, particularly of the level you're talking about, because you've got to look at every site where things have been taken out. Then you've got to look around there to work out whether this is natural fossilization or it's been a lightning strike. And if it has, that changes everything. And they've never looked for that, have they? They would have never done that.
No.
It would have never registered. Wow.
No. There are some beautiful fossils that I still want to bring to the museum, but some of them are a little too large. So I need to figure out a way of maybe, go there with some sort of a hammock with 4 handles, and carry it like, you carry the pharaohs, and 4 guys can carry this rock back, because they're beautiful fossils. Clearly body parts, you can see like a leg coming out, and the piece that was still attached to the body. There's some backbone and spine, beautiful spine stones with a thing sticking out the side. I need to brush up on my anatomy a little bit. I know enough about anatomy, obviously, more than the average person, because I studied pharmaceutics at Wits University at medical school. So you go through the same process of anatomy and physiology and all that. So I guess I'm slightly more versed in anatomy and so than the average person, but I need to brush up on that. And discovering these body parts has forced me to go and on my knowledge of anatomy. However, it would be great to bring somebody who's an open-minded paleontologist who has worked with discoveries of dinosaur bones and dinosaur fossils and those kind of things, and come and look at these things, because they will freak out. They will literally freak out. I have dinosaur teeth as well. When you look at the museums and look at the dinosaur teeth in the fossils of the dinosaurs, I have probably at least a dozen of those in my museum.
So it's all to do with the fact that the evidence is there. It's just a matter of people looking at it the right way. And when you were talking about fossilized pieces, I grabbed something, didn't I? And I was just wondering if I could just show you this one, Michael, something we've picked up that's been put together in 2 parts. And I'm going to try and hold this up properly.
Oh my God. Just get it a bit further from the camera.
Yeah,
a bit further from towards you. Yeah.
Remade. This is part 1. Now I'm going to...
Oh my God.
That's the face there, so I'll bring it face on for you now.
Oh my God.
And what's really fascinating about this being, as you can see, is that we have a forehead. I've got one, you've got one, but one of the 3 of us in this picture doesn't have a forehead at all.
Yes.
This was found in Australia. We found 4 of them, and I thought we'd bring this one up today. We've got it in 2 parts. And what happened was we got some gentlemen who put this back together. Now, one guy was on TV last week. He worked for the Australian Museum and fell out with them big time. He spent 5 years in jail because of them. And he put this back together. Oh, it's a great story, but we won't do that now. And what I'm going to show you now is the final creation. Now, what happened was when he finished, he gave it to this gentleman that works with Hollywood. And what are the things he works with, Evan?
The Predator and Alien films.
Predator and Aliens. He does faces for them. So what he did was he completed the process. Now, he got one thing wrong, and I'm going to show you what it looks like now. The forehead's a bit more than what's needed, but I'm going to hold next to you a Homo sapien sapien, and we'll put them together, and you might get a feel for the differences. Now,
yes.
Most importantly for me is look at the nose shapes there. Look at the eyes and the difference in the size of the eyes. And most importantly, look at the back.
Yeah.
Now, I would say to any woman, if you believe in natural birth, seriously, ladies, if you're carrying one of these, think seriously about cesarean, because the big problem with this one, mate, the one we've got here, is you notice there's no suture line at the back.
Yes. Yeah.
There isn't one. There isn't one. I've been to 2 other ones. There's no suture at the back. There's either 2 on the side, but I'm not convinced they are because they're on the descent and they're further down than ours, or that's just the crack that we had from this one. And if you look inside there, oh, sorry, hang on, I'll just do that for a sec. You'll notice there isn't an internal suture line running at the back.
Yeah.
Right there. So therefore,
yeah.
We've got a being here that's either got 2 sutures or none, which means it can't be a hominid. So when we talk about skulls and what's found there, when we look in there, we think we understand, like you're talking about now, what's been on this planet. There are 4 of these. This particular one is one of 4 we found, and the government's seen it. And this is the best one because it gives you an idea of what the skull looks like. Now, what you get from that is a completely different neck, not like ours, completely different.
Yeah.
But the most amazing part of this particular, we went on the first site, Michael, and when I was there, I picked up 2 bones, the femur bone, with gloves, of course, and I put it on. It was exactly the same match as mine, so I'm thinking 5'10". Then I pick up the humerus bone, and it goes from here down to there, but there's no elbow joint. And I measured it at 44 centimetres without the elbow joint. Now, we're Gibbons 35. We're about 30, 32 if you're a big basketball player, but we're not 45. But it was only 1 inch thick at the widest point. And it dawned on me, I've got this being. We found 4 of them, and they're separated over 2,000 kilometres, aren't they, Evan?
Yes.
Desert, riverine, and coastal. Not a mutation anymore. Can't do that. But the interesting part is I've got eyes that are 46% bigger than a sapiens. I've got an arm that's so damn long that would swing in the breeze, and that's all it could do, because the gravity we've got here, it wouldn't work properly. But if I lessened the eyes, if I lessened the glare of the sun and lived somewhere where there was less gravity, it would work fine. But you know where that can't be, Michael? It can't be here. It's got to come from somewhere else.
You know, I must tell you that I no longer believe the whole story that large animals can't survive on this earth because of gravity. I have a totally different take on that. And I know that of people still are still go down that channel. We haven't defined what gravity is.
No, we
don't know what nobody knows what gravity is. It remains the most mysterious force. We figured out nuclear forces. We're messing around with nuclear fission and fusion, and we've messed around with subatomic particles. Well, they don't really know what subatomic particles are. I'm not going to go down that road. I've done lots of lectures on that already. In fact, let's just give people a clue here. There are no particles. Okay, it's an illusion of particles. It's an illusion of particles.
They've never found an electron. I know. Yeah, it's not there.
Yeah, that's a whole nother discussion. It's a very exciting. but the point is that I believe that gravity is something very different, and gravity is relative to because gravity is an electromagnetic phenomenon. And this is really important for people to realize. Gravity is an electromagnetic phenomenon so let me give you an example why I say that. Because if gravity can bend light is an electromagnetic phenomenon, that means gravity must also be an electromagnetic phenomenon. Otherwise, it would have no effect on light.
It couldn't.
Okay,
that's a valid point. It couldn't. It can't bend light because it's a different phenomenon.
Yes.
Unless it's the same.
Yeah, so once we realize that toroidal fields and toruses, and this is why the torus stones that I have in my museum, we didn't even touch those. The torus stones are very important discoveries that point clearly to the ancient civilizations, which I believe the Anunnaki had a knowledge of toroidal fields and the generating energy from the 0 point or the center of a toroidal field. So the fact that our bodies and everything has a toroidal field around us, from our beating heart, you create a giant toroidal field around you. The moving blood in your body, everything from electrons to atoms to everything, every subatomic particle from subatomic particles and electrons that are toroidal fields, to atoms that are toroidal fields, to solar systems that are toroidal fields, of galaxies. We can see the toroidal nature of everything around us, as above, so below. And toroidal fields are driven by magnetic fields, sound and resonance, which create magnetic fields, and moving magnetic fields create electromagnetic fields. So there's a very simple progression of understanding the laws of nature, and how from the smallest to the largest, everything is governed by the same fundamental laws: sound, resonance, frequency, magnetism, and electromagnetism. So I believe that our bodies and everything, that the Earth's gravity is created by the toroidal field nature of the Earth. That is what creates the gravity of the Earth. And because each one of us has its own toroidal field around us, doesn't matter how small you are or how big you are, you have an electromagnetic field around you that is an electromagnetic field that operates within the electromagnetic field or the toroidal field of the Earth. And there's a natural relationship. Otherwise, you couldn't function in this world's environment. So gravity is an electromagnetic phenomenon. And our gravity and our relationship to the size of our body is related to the electromagnetic field gravity of the Earth. So it doesn't matter how big you are or how small you are, it is a relationship of the toroidal field that's generated around your body.
I gotcha. Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, you create it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is why we have giants that were a mile high.
Yeah.
Giants were a mile high that once walked the Earth, and giant creatures that were huge, like a mile. These giant dragons that were around, Ethan and whatever, that story of the giant dragon and the fish in the Bible. These creatures were the size of half of Australia.
It is in the book, isn't it? In the front, the third page, there were giants in those days. It's written in the Old Testament, right at the very beginning. They make it clear. They didn't take it out, did they?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what has become for me one of the most interesting books that carries so much information that boggles the mind, and I suspect that is why it was taken or not included in the Bible after it was put together by Constantine, right? Because ultimately Constantine is responsible for the Bible that we have today, from the Council of Nicaea. So the Book of Enoch, which should have been the Bible, has unbelievable information in it about the and so much more. Oh my God, Book of Enoch is, please, anybody that's watching this, go find the Book of Enoch and read it.
Yep, definitely.
Calm down, Evan.
Yeah.
No, you're right. It should have been the beginning. They should have put that in first before we read anything else to give us some perspective. It's sort of funny because in our next online conference, we're bringing in a gentleman called Paul Wallace, who's the Archdeacon of Canberra, and he's rewritten Genesis, or he's redone the Genesis, and he believes it's all about the Anunnaki and aliens coming here, and he's going to do a presentation on that. Primarily, that we misread it completely. It's there. He said they didn't change it. We didn't read it properly. That's the problem.
Yes, we didn't read it properly. It was originally written with much more detail, and then it was rewritten and eventually translated to English in grade 1 version of what was probably originally encoded through its original scripts, and the original language that those stories were written in had much more detail in it, and much more meaning meaning that or context meaning that was written in the original language that is completely lost in translation.
Yeah, it was.
One of my great examples that I always use is in the beginning there was nothing, and the Spirit of God moved over the waters. God said, "Let there be light." But what? So hold on. So nothing. There's nothing, but there's water.
Yeah, I thought that too.
Right, and that's really important. Really important, because in my lectures I share with people that NASA has been telling us for 30 years at least that there's water everywhere in space. Water is everywhere. There's water galaxies. There's the sun. Believe it or not, the sun has water. And the conclusion of NASA several years ago or a decade ago, the conclusion after studying a number of stars is that they found water on all the stars they studied. So their conclusion is that all stars have water. Now, you can't go to the pub and tell somebody while you're having a beer that you know that there's water on the sun. They'll think you're crazy.
Of course they will. Yeah.
And so this whole water thing, and the fact that the Spirit of God moved over the waters, has a very deep meaning. It's not just thrown in there because somebody was on drugs, right? So I'm beginning to think that water is ultimately the highest form of consciousness that brings forth light. Brings forth life. And if you just look at what water is, the combination of hydrogen, which is arguably the primordial monoatomic element, and monoatomic is really important here. And you have oxygen. So you got hydrogen and oxygen, the two most abundant things in pretty much all of creation. Now, people don't realize how abundant oxygen is, right? And now that we have water everywhere, we have oxygen, hydrogen, and water throughout all of space. Is it possible that space itself is actually just water? And they're trying to keep that hidden from us.
Space is water.
And that's when you read in the Bible, when God created the earth, he separated the heavens and the earth, and he put the firmament in the sky to separate the waters above from the waters below. What the freaking hell does that mean?
Waters above from the waters below. It means there was waters in both locations. That's what it means.
Yes.
Fascinating.
And I don't want to go into too much detail on this, because otherwise that's going to take us into a whole different direction. But all of this is important, because the question is, where did the flood come from? The flood, it tells us in the Bible that God opened the gates of heaven to let the waters pour onto the earth.
Above. It come from above. Yes. It's been concentrated, brought in.
If we think that there's just empty vacuum space, first of all, it's not a vacuum. It's impossible to be a vacuum. Anyone that still thinks that space is a vacuum must have their brain lobotomized and just take the blue pill or whatever color pill it is. And so literally, so anyone that still thinks that there's this vacuum up there, that's probably not the case. That is probably not the case. And Everything we've been told is a lie, and I'm beginning to think that the biggest lie, one of the biggest lies we've been told, to stop us thinking about life outside or whatever, is the what Earth is, our relationship to space, and it's quite possible that they've lied to us about what space is, and this is why the whole space program, whether it's NASA, the European Space Agency, and so forth, those are all very well constructed disinformation agencies that keep telling us the lie and showing us sci-fi videos and sci-fi movies to make us believe that this is what space is, when in fact it could be something very, very different.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're telling us that the sun has got water and all stars have water is their conclusion. What they in essence telling us is that the sun is most likely made up of water. And it's a very specific resonance frequency that creates the very special electromagnetic properties that make stars give off the specific light that they do. I'm going to stop here now because it gets more and more freaky as you realize how we've been lied and manipulated.
Well, we are, definitely.
But what's important is that now we have this flood, right? So the Earth... I'm sitting here with the physical evidence that these mountains were covered in mud. Where did that mud and water come from? Well, it wasn't pushed up from the ocean. I don't think it was. It was tidal waves in the ocean. It was the water came from somewhere else. Who knows? It could have been both. Could have been water just pouring down, just non-stop from the heavens, and also turbulence in the oceans, tidal waves. Really,
yeah, Michael. But I'm inclined to think we've got to remember something. People make a mistake when they look at ancient religious accounts, because they forget that within those ancient religious accounts are all our history. There were not separate history books written until quite recently. Pliny the Elder might have started it up then. But before then, we have to go back to these books and find there. And you're right. Yeah. It did say there was a separation of the firmament, and then they opened it up and the waters came from above. It seems to me very strongly that it did come from above, and we already had water here. They're separate. It seems that way. Yeah. That's what the Bible has said. And let's not ignore. I know that the Bible's been changed and turned into being symbolic, but we've got another gentleman who said, I've read this correctly. No, there's aliens all over the place, so it can be read the right way. You just got to look between the lines sometimes.
The Bible is the Bible is quite rightly put by you. The Bible is one of the many compilation of ancient texts that actually tells us the real history of the world.
Yes.
And that's what has been the scientific attack. Mainstream science is the enemy of the truth. That's why they set up mainstream science to separate it from these, what they do their best to undermine and delegitimize the books like the Bible and the historic elements of these books. I'm not talking about the drama and the soap opera of, he got up and he said to his son, do this. And that's the soap opera written into that storyline. Although there's a lot of truth in that too, but you got to separate the soap opera from the actual events that are shared with us, what happened and what happened to the earth, what creatures were around, what people and civilizations lived, and the giants that were here.
Yeah.
And the fact there were these beings, these God or the Elohim, that had very advanced knowledge and powers, and they controlled humanity. And not only humanity, that they cloned humanity and created all kinds of other chaos that we're only rediscovering now.
Oh, in a big way. Yeah. We definitely are. And throughout this year, we're going to see more of it, aren't we? It's going to be a fascinating year we're going through, Michael, unlike many others. But at the end of it all, and I suppose we really should sort of finish up now. We finally got one through. I want to finish this by making one point, is that through all of this, I'm going to repeat, there is an original prophecy taking place that believes that there is going to be a change at the end of this year. And it's supposed to be a major change in resonance and a change in attitude and maybe a cleansing of this planet. And I'm sort of hopeful, in fact, praying that is the case. And then in the future, we'll have a society that lives under different rules, somewhat like the rules that you're talking about with Ubuntu, mate. I'm thinking that's our solution and that's our salvation, because the Anunnaki seem to be running this show at the moment, well and truly, and this is a very fearful year. But I
think what's happening in the world right now is a perfect premise or an entree appetizer for the people of the world to realize that things are dramatically wrong.
Exactly.
That the socioeconomic structure we find ourselves in doesn't work. It's not there to help us and support us. It's just like we can't do anything. It's like we're literally trapped in a world, in our systems, in our countries, in our laws and regulations that prevent us and restrict us from actually living and being creative and creating and succeeding and doing amazing things. Everywhere we turn, there's laws and regulations that prevent us from doing what we would like to do to add to the benefit of society. So people are waking up and realizing it's going on now, and now especially these new draconian totalitarian rules that have been imposed on us by our governments that are supposed to be our servants. People are going, hold on, everything possible is wrong with this picture. So as we get through this and as people start to realize this, there could be a very dramatic shift, literally like it's moving up towards a tipping point, right? Building up, and then suddenly it just cracks and it gives. And it could happen at any stage right now. I think we're getting very, very close. The small town strategy is such a simple way for people to create communities of prosperity and abundance for the future. It is so simple. It is so beautiful, so elegant. It includes everyone. It embraces and invites everyone. It never, ever refuses anyone participation to benefit and to prosper within a community that works together in cooperation. And very quickly, people realize that while we might need money to set this up, to create these small towns and communities of abundance and prosperity, while we're going to have to use money to do that in the beginning, once we achieve that success and that cooperative structure, money will very quickly disappear from those communities. Because once we've set up those cooperative structures, businesses, farms, etc., everything we do belongs to everyone in that community. It's not communism, it's contributionism. Very different philosophies, right? You don't have a dictator that tells people what they can and cannot do. You have the community that allows themselves to do everything while they share everything for everyone's benefit. That's the completely different view and takeout. So once you start those communities of success and abundance, they no longer need to use money, because we're not doing it to make money. We're doing all these things for ourselves to create abundance, to create cures for cancer, to create bridges, and to create technology, and to create a new education system. So whatever we do, we create for ourselves, not to enrich ourselves, to enrich our lives. So we don't need money to do that. We need each other. And very quickly, money will disappear, and literally within a few years, the entire world can transition from the socioeconomic structure that many of us keeps calling democracy. Well, democracy is a fatally flawed ideology, and we need to move away from that as quickly as possible. Stop getting stuck in democracy, thinking it's going to solve something. It hasn't solved anything in, 1,000 years since the Greeks came up with it. So, not going to solve anything now.
No.
Right?
It doesn't work. Einstein said the greatest form of stupidity is to keep doing the same thing again and again and think it'll get better. It doesn't. You're right. Yeah. You're right. And I honestly believe, and I've told people this many times, I don't even care whether the original people are right or wrong. If we really want to change, and people do want to change, let's make it anyway, irrespective, and just get rid of this. I think it's good in that respect, Michael, because what we're seeing now is I think people are waking up for the first time. The cabal runs everything. And people don't want Bill Gates as their leader anymore. And if they don't want Bill Gates, they have to get rid of the whole friggin' system. It's not just him, it's the whole thing around it. And I think they see that. So I think there's always a positive manic, and this is a big changing time. So, yeah, that's a good way to finish, mate. I always like to talk. Your vision of the future always gives me heart. That's why I thought we'd finish with that one, if you didn't mind.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, Steve, thanks so much for catching up with me. It was really great pleasure to share with you and Evan these discoveries that I've made, which is just, I believe, earth-shattering, life-changing, the fossils and these body parts. And once again, all that does for me is while we exploring and discovering these undiscovered truths about our human history and the earth history, what that does is it tells us that we have to do something different and new into the future. And I think we now have the very simple plan of what not to do and what we should do into the future, so we can create a beautiful a world of prosperity and abundance for every single living, breathing human being. No one is ever excluded. And that's what the Once More Town model presents to everybody.
Lovely. Love it. Okay, mate, and we'll do this again. And when we finish, there's one question I wanted to ask you once we've turned this off, and then we'll have some tea. Okay, thanks, mate. I enjoyed that, and let's do it again if you're happy with that, because it's getting closer. So yeah, it's getting closer.
Excellent. Thanks, guys.
Thank
Till
you.
next time.
Okay, mate. Bye-bye.